Explanations. Storage banks. What must be understood by storage banks? What the storage banks amount to is that everything planetary is recorded in these. Therefore, all thoughts, feelings, emotions, and other impulsations of the human being, as well as his or her deeds and acts, his or her mentality, vices, addictions, habits, passions, fears, and anxieties, hopes, wishes, and emotions, etc., as well as all spoken, imagined, or chanted words, and totally all things and all that the human being ever undertakes in a positive or negative form, learns, creates in love, knowledge, and wisdom, etc., are deposited or stored in the storage banks as impulses. The impulses of a human being, which are deposited in the storage banks, can consciously and also unconsciously, as well as subconsciously, be withdrawn or called up by the human being or by his or her next personality, and in turn by the next personality, and so on, and be used as knowledge for further consciousness evolution. Nevertheless, an unconscious and subconscious withdrawal of the old impulses from the storage banks is the rule, where the impulses then penetrate into the consciousness as an inspiration or as the first thought. With this possibility, it is given that the human being can, in many respects, use valuable impulses from the knowledge, the love, and from the wisdom of his or her previous personality of the last life or several preceding lives. Depending on the state of consciousness of the human being, he or she is thereby naturally also able to withdraw impulses of a negative form and then use these in a likewise negative form. If the human being has reached a sufficiently high evolutive consciousness level, then he or she is also able to retrieve desired information, as well as general knowledge-related information, from the storage banks of his or her own personality line. With sufficient capabilities and the necessary knowledge, such information concerning one's own former personalities can also be called up through a hypnotic state. The so-called regressions to past lives are, unfortunately, usually performed by certain charlatans, etc., by putting the human beings believing in them under hypnosis, and these then have delusional past life recollections, which do not correspond to the truth of former lives. With regard to the past life recollections, the ones hypnotized, as a rule, only dream up some of their own memories or those of other human beings, or reproduce recollections which are based on things that they have read, seen, heard, or experienced in the present life, etc. This charlatan-based hypnotizing and bringing forth of past life recollections ordinarily happens because the hypnotists do not have sufficient abilities to move the ones hypnotized into a trance state in which these would be able to retrieve information from their own storage banks. With sufficient abilities and the necessary skill and knowledge, such information concerning one's own former personalities can also be called up through a meditative state, as it is also possible through hypnosis, if a real expert in terms of hypnotic abilities is given. Fauna and flora also have storage banks, but on an entirely different basis, having nothing to do with a consciousness. Rather, for the flora, the impulse consciousness is given, and for the fauna, the instinct consciousness. Consequently, these forms also have their storage banks because even these life forms found their existence through spirit energy and spirit forms, like everything and everyone that exists alive in some form. This includes those forms which do not stand in the sense of an actual vitality, like solid or gaseous matter, such as rock and stone, as well as gases, etc., etc. Solid and gaseous matter each have only an energy consciousness, which corresponds from spiritual creational energy and is stored only in the belt of the material universe as a creational principle, and consequently is not just planetarily, but universally effective, and brings forth solid as well as gaseous matter. Human beings equals conscious consciousness. Matter equals energy consciousness. Plants equals impulse consciousness. Fauna equals instinct consciousness. JHWH, female and male, equals the highest wise one with regard to the spiritual teaching of the creational natural laws and recommendations, etc. JHWH equals evolution step of the human being above the JHWH with regard to the spiritual teaching, and stands above the JHWH in knowledge and wisdom. JHWH, female and male. The state of the JHWH is the highest wise one of all wisdom, which can be reached by a human being with regard to the creational natural laws and recommendations. Only such a JHWH can appear as a universal prophet and proclaimer of the spiritual teaching, that is, the teaching of the prophets, or the teaching of the truth, teaching of spirit, teaching of life. But has been changed now to teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life, and bring the knowledge and the teaching about the true creational natural laws and recommendation to the human beings. The developmental process to become a universal prophet and proclaimer is this, that after the final completion of the material life and body of the human being, his or her spirit form enters into the level of the high council and into the pure spirit level Arahat Athersata, and further evolves. By a decision of the pure spirit level Arahat Athersata, it is then possible that this spirit form, always as the only one, returns from the Arahat Athersata level via the level of the high council to the material world and once again animates a human being, who then appears as the always sole universal prophet and proclaimer in order to teach the human life forms concerning the creational natural laws and recommendations. And this instruction occurs in the form of the spiritual teaching, that is, the teaching of the prophets, or the teaching of truth, teaching of spirit, teaching of life, or teaching of truth, teaching of creation energy, teaching of life. To the JHWH's and JHWH's own are the very highest cognitions with regard to the spiritual teaching, or teaching of truth, teaching of spirit, teaching of life, in the creational natural laws and recommendations. Already in the form of the JHWH level, the knowledge, love, and wisdom with regard to the spiritual teachings are so highly developed that no conscious errors of judgment or maltreatments whatsoever, as well as no incorrect actions or other infringements, can be committed anymore against the creational natural laws and recommendations. This is because the true love, as well as the enormous knowledge and wisdom about the creational natural laws and recommendations, have become too extensive and too highly and too mighty for infringements against these, to still be possible. It is quite a different story with the other Ishwish or Ishurish forms, which do not relate to the creational natural law and recommendation based matters, but to purely material areas or fields of study, etc., from whom also great knowledge and great wisdom can indeed be obtained. But these Ishwishes and Ishwishes of purely material knowledge areas are not immune to committing conscious errors. Consequently, these can commit serious infringements which are against the social or creational natural regulation, and by which even the most severe destructions and demolishments can be brought about. This was, for example, even the case with the Ishwish who, in his megalomania, created the Ishwish Mata, or the God's Eye, the ring nebula, in the constellation of Lyra in our Dern universe. This Ishwish was an Ishwish of the physics and technical sciences, etc., and in these material knowledge areas alone, he had great knowledge and great wisdom, and was thus an Ishwish, that is, a king of wisdom. At the same time, it must be said and explained that wisdom, which is very often misunderstood by the human beings of earth, actually, in this material sense means nothing other than great and extensive knowledge, which rests on intellect-based and rationality-based cognitions, and a very good ability and mastery with regard to the material scientific field, which arises entirely from a relevant material learning.